This is a work of fiction created for moral reflection and entertainment. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. Have you ever imagined discovering, too late, that the greatest inheritance is not in the will, but in the secret that someone tried to hide until their last breath? In this story, a simple nurse becomes the guardian of a truth capable of changing destinies and revealing who truly loves and who is just waiting to inherit. Stay until the end, because the decision she makes may make you rethink what you really leave behind in this world: money or dignity. Helena adjusted the strap of her bag as the iron gate swung open. The creak seemed to announce an ancient verdict, heavy as lead. Inside, the mansion towered with columns that smelled of wax and the past. The gardener looked away, as if afraid of saying too much. She took a deep breath and walked across the damp rock garden. The hall exuded a museum-like chill, with portraits following the visitor. Motionless clocks and tired flowers made up the ceremony of silence. A dark carpet muffled footsteps and thoughts. Helena felt her homework uniform against her sweaty skin. "I'm the nurse," she said, and her voice sounded too small. The housekeeper gestured curtly toward the east wing corridor. "He sleeps little, wakes up distressed, asks for warm water," he whispered. The echo from the hallway carried the smell of medicine and old wood. Helena wrote down routines, dosages, and schedules with pinpoint precision. Each word seemed to weigh on the drawing board like a commitment. When she opened the bedroom door, the darkness held her back for a moment. Thick curtains filtered the afternoon in shades of sickly amber. The machinery breathed alongside a body more bone than gesture. Augusto Ferraz looked at her with eyes like a distant sea. She smiled simply, the kind of smile that says, "I'm here. Be practical, young lady," he said, his voice cracking like porcelain. "I can't stand regrets. I can stand procedures." Helena adjusted the pillows, checked the lines, and looked at the safe. There, discreetly, leaning against the wall, like an old and faithful dog, the metal had the gravity of secrets that do not age. Between one measurement and another, Helena found the pulse of the environment. It was a slow heart, pierced by paper murmurs. In the background, the safe remained, a presence that didn't need to be spoken about. The tip of the key under the lamp shone like an earthy half-moon. She looked away, learning not to see what burns. Dinner passed like an invisible ritual, trays coming and going. The housekeeper brought pale soup and news of absent children. "They arrive when they can, when it's convenient," he commented colorlessly. Helena wrote down the information as if she were saving a password. Augusto sipped the broth and coughed, asking for a lower light. Night fell with the patience of a seamstress, stitch by stitch. Helena revisited devices, blankets, and wounds of silence. "Thank you for treating me like a person, not an invention," he said. She lightly touched his bony hand, a gesture of discreet anchoring. The safe breathed again, or was it just the house sighing? Before midnight, a storm began to rattle the roof. Lightning outlined the frames in flashes of memory. Augusto woke up startled, asking for warm water and a short word. Helena was precise, and precision calmed the old ocean. In the interval, the key under the lamp seemed to watch. When the rain became a mantra, Augusto called her name. "Helena," he said with the urgency of someone repeating an oath. "There are things I don't trust to those who share my blood." She stood still, holding the glass between the medicine and the fear. The safe behind seemed to approach in thought. He closed his eyes and opened them as if passing through a tunnel. "Don't open the safe until the right moment," he whispered. "The moment is recognized, not marked on the clock." Helena nodded, filing the sentence in the innermost drawer. Outside, a clap of thunder struck the scene and cut off the light. The electrical emergency came in whispering with pale, cold light. Helena checked levels, changed the battery, and recalibrated the serum. On the monitor, pulses traced tired hills. Augusto watched her like someone seeing a lighthouse in the fog. "You have careful hands, not usual ones," he said. She didn't answer. She let the silence be painkiller. On the nightstand, the key still lay in alert. The wall clock insisted on existing for a few seconds. The old man took a deep breath and pointed to the lamp. "Underneath it, Helena, when I'm not there." "Don't say that," she tried, but the sentence came out with little faith. He smiled, a faint trace on a face made of old maps. "The truth comes without asking permission. Receive it sitting down." Helena held the glass and his eyes at the same time. The storm eased, as if the commercial break was coming. Augusto asked to listen to the window, and it opened a crack. The city breathed outside, distant and wet. He recounted in 2 lines the birth of his own ambition. Then he fell silent, like someone who closes a book on the wrong chapter. Helena adjusted the blanket and settled her presence on the edge of the bed. The footsteps in the hallway ceased with studied care. The house seemed to be waiting for some invisible signature. "If they come asking, tell them I went to bed early," he murmured. Helena agreed, and the clock came back into existence. The safe remained, a silent accomplice to the agreement. It was then that he asked for the pen and her hand underneath. He signed the air with gestures of someone untying knots. "Promise you won't be afraid of what's right?" She wanted to promise more, but could only nod. The pen scratched an imaginary piece of paper and stopped. Augusto's breath became shallow, a staircase missing steps. Helena activated protocols, called for backup on the intercom. The housekeeper responded with a delay of ages. On the monitor, the path became an unstable plateau. She spoke to him as if holding a bridge. "I'm here," he repeated, the rhythm of a mantra and a metronome. His fingers sought hers like a root seeks water. "Thank you for seeing me, man, not bank," he whispered. The sentence arrived in one piece and split the room in half. Then an ancient weariness took its place in the world. The noise of the storm retreated behind the curtain. The monitor wrote a line that did not curve. Helena closed his eyelids with the back of her hand. There was tenderness and an implicit order in that gesture. The house began to breathe again, now in a different tone. She turned off half the lights and kept the lamp on. Below, the key waited like promise and weight. Helena picked it up, feeling the metal say something cold. He kept it in the inside pocket of his lab coat, next to his wrist, and he whispered, "I will comply, whatever the cost." The housekeeper came in with old news eyes. "The children will come at dawn," he said, almost apologizing. Helena waved, measuring the time of the next solitude. In the bedroom, the safe was a compact rectangle of night. She sat, breathed, and listened to the house learn to mourn. Dawn brought the sound of imported engines cutting through the gate. Helena, still in her uniform from the night before, looked out the window. Beatrice Ferraz came out first, with a firm heel and a scent of power. Behind, Marcello, in a dark suit, cold eyes and phone to his ear. They didn't look at the body, they just asked, "Where is the lawyer?" Dr. Celio Andrade arrived shortly after, barely letting his umbrella drip. He greeted Helena with a short, bureaucratic wave. The children were already arguing over the order of roles, as if death were a detail. Beatrice ordered coffee, strong and without delay, looking around with disgust. Marcello, restless, examined the room, noticing the safe. "My father was paranoid," he said, almost laughing. "He thought the whole world wanted his money." Helena kept her gaze fixed on the switched-off monitor. "He wanted peace, sir," he replied, the voice of someone closing curtains. Beatrice pursed her lips, not understanding the tone. The housekeeper entered with a tray and knowing eyes. No one noticed when Helena slid her hand into her pocket. The key was there, cold, remembering every heartbeat. Celio announced the reading of the will for the end of the afternoon. The brothers nodded, as if accepting an ancient victory. In the hallway, Helena heard snatches of conversation. She seems to know too much. The lawyer is weak. Does the safe still exist? Each sentence was a blade, and she learned to walk without making a sound. Augusto, even dead, still controlled the movements of the house. The nurse felt the weight of being the guardian of a living secret. At lunch, Beatrice feigned kindness. "You took good care of him, didn't you?" "I did what I could," Helena replied, cutting the silence to pieces. "And did he say something to you before he left?" The question was too sweet to be innocent. Helena smiled slightly. Nothing that could be put into words. Celio watched from afar, uneasily. I knew something was out of alignment between documents and destination. Augusto had spoken to him days before, asking for complete discretion. But the letter, the blessed letter, he had never seen, and it gnawed at him like belated guilt. As afternoon fell, the wake began in the main hall. Helena stood behind, near the stairs, her gaze fixed on the spot. The candles flickered under the air conditioning. Beatrice spoke about her father's legacy. Marcello recorded stories. Mourning was a costume. Amidst the hubbub, the lawyer approached. "Can I trust that Mr. Augusto left in peace?" he asked. "He left peacefully," Helena replied, "but don't take everything at face value." Celio frowned, trying to decipher the subtext. She pulled away before he could insist, leaving the air smelling of secrecy. The room was full when the lawyer asked for silence. The words echoed like velvet hammers. Beatrice and Marcello sat side by side, exchanging victorious glances. Helena stood in the background, invisible, near a half-open window. The document lay on the table, heavy as a sentence. "I declare my assets and properties to my children, Beatrice and Marcello Ferraz." Celio read each line with a firm voice, but his eyes kept moving away from the paper. No mention of donations, charity, or promises. Not a word about the nurse who gave him comfort at the end. Helena clutched the key in her pocket as if it might burn. When the lawyer finished, a quiet applause rang out. Of relief, not pain. Beatrice cried theatrically while already typing something on her cell phone. Marcello gave a controlled smile, half victory, half warning. "Now we can take care of the legacy," he said. Helena looked away, feeling the world tighten around the edges. Celio collected the papers and placed them in the leather folder. "Everything is as recorded in the registry office," he said, but there was a slight tremor between the syllables. Helena realized the man was aware of some absence. Augusto always planned beyond the paper. "What about the nurse?" asked Beatrice with a sugar-coated, poisonous tone. "You will be duly compensated for your services," the lawyer replied. Helena smiled with practiced serenity. "I didn't do it for a reward, madam. I did it out of humanity." Marcello laughed, unabashed. "Humanity doesn't pay the bills." She did not answer. Silence was the only possible resistance. At that moment, he realized that the right moment had not yet arrived. The safe waited patiently in the empty room, and the truth slept behind the metal. Celio approached the end of the room, whispering softly, "Mrs. Helena, can I speak to you later?" "Of course," he replied, feigning neutrality. "There's something that worries me, but I need to confirm." She nodded, and the silent pact was sealed in the middle of the wake. When everyone left, the house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Helena climbed the stairs with steps of someone who didn't want to belong. Augusto's room was intact, as if he had expected it. She closed the door, turned off the light, and sat in the armchair. The key glowed in the dark. The right moment had begun. Night fell heavily on the mansion again, and the wind sang in the windows. Helena stood for long minutes looking at the safe, still, silent, insistent. Every shadow that crossed the room felt like a warning, an invisible hand saying no. But the memory of Augusto's voice was stronger than the fear. She took the key, took a deep breath, and knelt before the secret. The metal groaned as he turned the lock, the ancient sound of a broken pact. For a moment, nothing happened. Only the sound of her heart filled the space. When he opened the heavy door, a smell of paper and iron came out, old and thick. Inside, a brown leather briefcase tied with faded ribbon waited. Helena pulled her, feeling the weight of time between her hands. He opened the folder and found 2 stacks of documents. A will dated 2 years earlier and a handwritten letter. The handwriting was unmistakable, firm, disciplined, achingly human. She read silently, "If you are reading this, it is because I trusted you more than my own family." The paper trembled, but not from her hands. It seemed to vibrate on its own. In the letter, Augusto explained that he had left half of his fortune to social projects. He said his sons had manipulated lawyers, torn up previous versions, and bought silence. And he left instructions for Helena to hand everything over to someone she trusted, if necessary. She felt the world spin upside down, the ground dissolve into guilt and fear. Now I understood what he meant by right time. He closed the safe and hid the folder inside a clothes drawer. The sound of the gate in the distance made her jump. Someone was arriving. Through the gap in the curtain, he saw the headlights of a car approaching. Beatriz and Marcelo had left, but returned earlier than expected. Helena turned off the light, stepped back, and leaned against the wall, breathing slowly. Beatriz's voice echoed through the hallway. "Check if the nurse is still awake." Helena remained motionless, her heart beating in rhythms that science could not explain. The guard opened the door without knocking. She pretended to sleep in the armchair. The flashlight swept across the room, stopping on the safe, locked and clean. "All right," the man said, "but she seems nervous." When the sound of footsteps faded away, Helena looked up. He picked up the phone and called the only number he knew to be reliable. Ricardo, a former journalist, friend of her late husband, today more lonely than famous. "I need to see you tomorrow. It's serious. It's dangerous." On the other side, he just replied, "Bring proof." She stayed awake the rest of the night, going over every line of the letter. Augusto confessed mistakes, regrets, and unrequited loves. But above all, he left her with a mission that is not chosen. It is inherited. When the sun began to shine through the curtains, the nurse was no longer the same. Now, she was the guardian of a truth that could cost her everything. The next morning, coffee was served with silence between each sip. Beatriz watched her with a poorly made disguise, her eyes trained on every gesture. "Did you sleep well?" he asked with a cracked porcelain smile. "As always," Helena replied, returning the look serenely. But inside, fear had already begun to take root. Marcelo received a short call and went out into the garden, speaking softly. Helena saw him gesturing irritably, something about lawyer, notary's office, deadlines. She understood. The will was not yet completely safe. Celio, the lawyer, must have been in doubt or having a crisis of conscience, and that could change everything for better or for worse. When she went up to Augusto's room, Helena noticed something different. The drawer where he had hidden the folder was slightly out of place. The handkerchief covering the documents was folded inside out. His entire body responded with a spiraling shiver. Someone knew. Someone had been there while she slept. He went down quickly, trying to keep his steps calm. He found Celio in the living room, arranging papers and avoiding eye contact. "Can I help you with something?" he asked, too tense to sound natural. "I wanted to talk about Mr. Augusto," she said, choosing her words. "He left instructions that you may not know." Celio turned pale, and his eyes searched the stairs as if calculating escape routes. "Not everything needs to come to light, Mrs. Helena. Sometimes the truth destroys more than it heals. But sometimes it's the only cure," she replied firmly. The silence between the two was a minefield ready to explode. "Let me think of something," he muttered, and hurried off. That afternoon, the housekeeper came over as she was clearing the tray. "Be careful, young lady. The house has ears and eyes that never sleep. Helena looked at her with gratitude and fear. Has someone been in Mr. Augusto's room? He asked. The woman just lowered her head. The son, he was looking for something. Helena went upstairs again and locked herself in her room. He took the folder and put it inside his bag, along with an old Bible. If they want to watch me, let them watch the void, he thought. He decided that this would be his last night at the Ferraz mansion. But the electronic gate was locked. No one could leave without permission. Beatrice appeared at the door as night fell, a glass of wine in her hand. Aren't you going to have dinner with us, dear? Helena forced a smile and replied, Not today. I need to rest. Rest from what? Beatrice insisted. From so much secrecy? The nurse was silent, and that silence was answer enough. That morning, Helena slept badly, between dreams and imaginary steps. The clock was showing 3 in the morning when he heard the doorknob click. The door opened slowly, revealing Marcello with a flashlight in his hands. I need to check something, he said, without excuse or disguise. Helena sat up in bed, her voice calm but her blood cold. What are you looking for, Mr. Marcello? He asked, controlling his trembling. My father was paranoid. Maybe he left some document. His eyes swept the room methodically, hunting for exposed nerves. If you find it, let us know. It could be dangerous for everyone. She smiled wryly. Danger is selective, don't you think? When he left, Helena noticed that the lantern had gone out by itself. The silence that remained was a promise of conflict. Beatrice appeared at dawn, overdressed for a widow. Good morning, nurse. Did you sleep, or were you thinking about the safe? The provocation came with coffee and an accusatory look. Mrs. Beatrice, I take care of people, not coffers, he replied. Ah, but people sometimes take care of themselves, don't they? The woman approached, her voice low and sharp. My father was too trusting of strangers. I hope he didn't abuse that. Helena held his gaze, and that was enough to seal the hatred between them. Later, he found Celio in the garden, smoking nervously. They're testing you, he warned. They want to see how much more you can take. I can handle whatever it takes. You know something, Dr. Celio. He took a drag on his cigarette with visible guilt. Yes, but I can't talk about it here. So when will you tell me, he insisted, before it's too late? In the afternoon, the housekeeper was dismissed without explanation. The atmosphere in the house changed invisibly but oppressively. Helena heard the locking of doors, the counting of keys, the whispers. The sons were preparing something, a siege, perhaps a trap. She realized there was no way out. The war was silent but real. At night, while tidying the drawers in his room, he noticed a flaw in the wall. A small tear in the paint on the back of the safe revealed something hidden. She pulled it out and found an old photograph. Augusto, young, with an unknown woman. On the back, a handwritten sentence, the love that fortune could not erase. Helena put the photo in her pocket, not understanding but knowing it mattered. Before going to bed, he heard the sound of the intercom at the reception. Mrs. Helena, the gate is locked until further notice. By whom? He asked, his throat dry. Order of Lady Beatrice. Fear was no longer an idea. It now had a fixed address. She locked the room from the inside and turned off the lights. The closed safe, the hidden briefcase, and the sound of held breath. In the dark, she promised herself that she would get out of there by sunrise. But the house, alive and complicit, seemed to have other plans. And fear now slept in the armchair next to him. The sun had not yet risen when Helena opened the bedroom window. The cold dawn air brought the scent of wet earth and distant freedom. She placed the folder inside a simple bag, covered with clothes. He needed to get out before his children woke up, before they realized his decision. But the gate, electronic and guarded, was a cruel obstacle. As he was thinking, he heard a discreet knock on the back door. It was the gardener, a thin, silent man with eyes that understand secrets. "You want to get out of here, don't you?" he whispered. "He asked me to help if necessary." Mr. Augusto?" she asked, surprised. The man just nodded. "He left me a letter. He said you would know when." Guided by him, she crossed the backyard, through bushes and shadows. The service gate creaked, rusty but obedient. Before leaving, Helena looked back. The mansion looked like a sinking ship. "Thank you," she said to the gardener, who simply replied, "Run." She ran, and the sound of her heels became a rhythm of survival. On the street, the city still slept in grey tones. She took a taxi and asked to get off at an old, discreet square. Ricardo was already waiting for her, with the same tired and ethical look from his time in the newsroom. "Did you bring it?" he asked without greeting. She showed the folder. "I brought what can destroy a family." They went to an empty cafe, where the smell of fresh bread contrasted with the weight of the moment. Ricardo opened the documents carefully, reading quickly and silently. When he reached the letter, he looked up. "This is explosive, Helena." "It's true," she replied, "and it's the only thing he asked me to protect. If this gets out, there will be powerful people after you." Helena drank the coffee in one gulp without tasting it. "I don't want fame or justice. I just want him to rest in peace." Ricardo nodded, but his journalistic instinct was already stirring inside him. "Leave it to me. I'll find out what they did with that will." "Be careful," she urged. "They have no limits." As they were saying goodbye, a black car stopped on the other side of the street. The windows were mirrored, but she felt the eyes behind them. Fear returned, now dressed as real persecution. Ricardo pushed her gently. "Go home. I'll let you know when I know." But Helena knew. From that moment on, home was no longer anywhere. She walked quickly down the sidewalk, the wind tugging at her coat. Each step seemed like an echo from the past, calling her back to the mansion. At the corner, she looked back one last time and saw the car following her. Augustus's secret was no longer just kept, it was being hunted. And the nurse who swore to care for lives now fought to save her own. The day dawned slowly, covered by a mist that seemed to hide intentions. Helena spent hours walking aimlessly, trying to decide what to do. The weight of the briefcase seemed to grow with each step, as if it were carrying something alive. He entered a cheap boarding house, locked himself in, and turned on the TV at a low volume. The news talked about the death of businessman Augusto Ferraz, and nothing more. Ricardo called early in the afternoon, his voice strained and breathless. "I checked the records, Helena. There are 2 wills, one legal and one hidden. And the real one is the manuscript," she confirmed, feeling her heart race. "Yes, the official name was changed last year. Beatriz and Marcelo bought the notary office." Helena sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the guilt of the world fall on her shoulders. "If you publicize this, they will come after you with everything they have," warned Ricardo. "I'm not going to divulge anything. I just want the truth to exist somewhere." "Then leave it to me. I know someone at the public prosecutor's office." "Ricardo, promise me you'll be careful," he asked, almost pleading. "I promise, but tell me, who else knows about this?" Helena thought for a moment before answering. Maybe the lawyer, Dr. Celio. He seemed divided. On the other end of the line, silence. The kind of silence that precedes an omen. Divided is dangerous. Be careful, Helena. Promise me you won't go back there. She hesitated. "I promise." But the voice betrayed the promise before she finished. Hours later, he heard knocking on the guest house door. He looked through the peephole. No one. When he opened it, an envelope was on the floor. Inside, a single typewritten sheet. "You shouldn't have opened the safe." Fear took human form and sat beside her. Helena tore the paper, but the words remained engraved in her mind. Late in the afternoon, he decided to go out and meet Ricardo in person. She walked through narrow streets, disguised, always looking back, but she didn't notice the man in the brown coat following her from afar. He walked into a bakery, looked around, and the phone rang again. "Helena," said the cold voice, "go back to the mansion. It's better for you." The sound of the car passing by on the sidewalk almost covered her panic. "Who are you?" he asked, his breath short. The call dropped before an answer came. She knew time was running out, and that the truth alone was not enough. The war for inheritance now had a new battlefield, the street. Helena returned to the boarding house, but she couldn't sleep anymore. He picked up the old photo of Augusto and the unknown woman. He remembered the words behind the picture, "The love that fortune could not erase." Suddenly, something clicked. The woman's face looked familiar. She was identical to Beatriz, but younger, much younger. The next morning, Helena was surprised by an insistent knock. When he opened it, he found Celio, pale, with dark circles under his eyes and a tired expression. "How did you find me?" she asked nervously. "It wasn't difficult. I just had to follow whoever followed you," he replied ironically. "They know you have the papers, and they'll act fast." Helena let him in, closing the door tightly. "Dr. Celio, did you know about the real will?" He sighed, looking at the floor as if confessing to a mirror. "I knew, in part, but I never saw the letter. Augusto was suspicious even of me." "And yet you agreed to read the fake?" she asked, indignant. "I didn't accept, Helena. I was coerced," he said, his voice breaking. "Beatrice threatened me with evidence of corruption in the office. I gave in." She fell silent, assessing the man before her. Guilty, but human. "Now I want to fix it. I have a copy of their bank records. It might help." "Then help me. It's the least you owe Mr. Augusto." He nodded and took an envelope from his jacket. "But there's something else. This letter." He handed her a yellowed sheet of paper. Helena opened it, her hands trembling. It was a second letter, dated the same day as the first. In it, Augustus mentioned the truth about the forgotten heiress. The text ended abruptly. "Celio, you will know when you deliver." Helena stared at him, shocked. "Did you know there was a hidden daughter?" "I suspected, but I never had any proof." She showed the photo she had found behind the safe. "So look, the woman next to him is Beatriz's mother. But there's something wrong. She couldn't be the sole heir." Celio brought his hands to his face, as if the weight of guilt was crushing him. My God. Augusto had another daughter before the wedding. That changes everything. Helena stepped back, feeling the ground disappear. And where is she now? I don't know, but someone does, and they're trying to bury it. "What if it's Beatrice?" whispered Helena. Before he could answer, the sound of tires braking cut through the air. Celio looked out the window and turned pale. "They found us." "Who?" she asked. "Beatriz? Marcelo?" "Both of us," he replied, pulling her hand. "We need to leave now." But it was already late. Heavy footsteps were climbing the stairs of the boarding house. Helena grabbed the folder and the letter, her heart racing. Celio pointed to the back window. "Go, I'll hold them off." "I'm not leaving him here," he protested. "Go now, nurse. This truth must live, even if I don't live to see it." She jumped out the window seconds before the door was broken down. On the ground outside, the sound of fighting filled the air. She ran without looking back, the echo of voices mixed with the sound of gunshots. The folder was still safely in his arms. But now, in addition to the inheritance, there was a new mission: to discover who the forgotten daughter was, and expose, once and for all, the Ferraz family's empire of lies. Helena spent the night hiding in an abandoned warehouse in the North Zone. The air smelled of rust and dust, and my heart beat in rhythm with anticipation. Every noise outside seemed like an announcement that they had found her. He turned on the old radio he found there and heard the news he didn't want. Nurse suspected of stealing documents and jewelry from businessman Augusto Ferraz. The reporter's voice sounded neutral, but the content was devastating. Photos of her circulated on all networks. Headlines called for immediate arrest. Beatrice and Marcelo had won the first round of the war. Ricardo tried to contact her, but her cell phone had been tracked and turned off. Now she was a fugitive, and the lie was the new testament to truth. Days later, a video appeared online, edited footage of Augusto's bedroom. Helena appeared, opening the safe, taking the folder, without context, without defense. The caption read, "The nurse who tricked a dying man for money." The comments were cruel, and the faces that once trusted her disappeared. They've constructed the perfect narrative, he thought, swallowing his despair. That same day, an envelope was pushed under the shed door. Inside, a handwritten letter. "If you want to survive, bring the folder to the lawyer." The signature was Celio's, or someone pretending to be him. Helena no longer knew who to trust, but her instincts told her she needed to act. He took the briefcase, put it under his coat, and left for the indicated address. It was a small old house hidden behind a disused church. When he entered, he found Celio, wounded but alive. "They tried to kill me, Helena. They want to erase everything." She helped him sit up, blood staining his shirt. "You have to go to the press. It's the only way out." "I can't," he replied, his voice breaking. "They've already taken over everything." Celio took a deep breath and pointed to an envelope on the table. "Here are the bank records, the proof of the forged will." Helena caught him, but he held her hand first. "They will come. And when they do, don't hesitate. Publish everything." Minutes later, the sound of tires on gravel cut through the air. Celio pushed her towards the back door. "Run, Helena! This time it's your life that's at stake." She ran between trees and shadows, hearing the bang of doors being broken down. And for the first time, he understood that protecting the truth was expensive, perhaps too expensive. On the way, he called Ricardo, his voice trembling and firm. "It's time to reveal everything," she said. "Get the cameras ready." "Are you sure? This could end them or you." "Then let it end, but not with the truth." And he hung up before fear had a chance to respond. 2 days later, the news spread through the city like wildfire. Ricardo had scheduled an emergency press conference. Local channels, reporters, and curious onlookers surrounded the small auditorium of a newspaper. In the center of the stage, a simple table with a microphone and a leather briefcase. Behind the sign, "The Truth of Augusto Ferraz." Helena arrived disguised, with her hair tied up and sunglasses on. Ricardo welcomed her with a quick hug, without time for emotion. "Are you ready?" he asked, adjusting the recorder. "No, but who expects to be?" she replied, with a tired half-smile. The auditorium filled up, and the cameras began rolling. "Ladies and gentlemen, there are lies that last as long as money buys silence." Ricardo's voice cut through the air like a precise blade. "Today, we will reveal documents that prove the manipulation of Augusto Ferraz's will." Murmurs ran through the room. Cell phones were raised. Flashes popped. Helena opened the folder and placed the 2 versions of the will on the table. "This is the registered copy, and this is the true one, written in my own hand." She read the letter in front of everyone. "I leave half of what I own to those the world has forgotten, those who have no voice but have a soul." The words echoed like prayer and sentence. Celio, leaning on crutches, confirmed, "That's Mr. Augusto's handwriting." But the final blow came next. Ricardo showed photos, notes, and transactions that linked Beatrice and Marcelo to the notary's bribery. Reporters took notes, cameras broadcast in real time. The image of the perfect heirs crumbled in seconds. Beatrice stormed into the auditorium, shouting, "That's a lie! This woman is setting this up!" Helena remained calm, her gaze serene as that of someone who has already lost everything. "If it's a lie, why are you so afraid of the truth?" he replied. The audience reacted with a mixture of shock and curiosity. Marcello tried to snatch the documents from the table, but Celio got in the way. "Don't touch anything that doesn't belong to you anymore," he shouted, and the flashes captured the moment. The police arrived minutes later, accompanied by officials from the public ministry. Ricardo had alerted the authorities before the press conference. Beatriz tried to run away, Marcello argued, and chaos took over the room. Helena just watched, motionless, like someone watching the end of a storm. Justice finally began to breathe. In the midst of the confusion, Celio approached, his face tired but relieved. "He would have been proud of you," he said with a half-smile. Helena held his hand, her eyes filled with tears. "He just wanted rest, Doctor. And now perhaps he has gotten it." Outside, the city applauded. But the sound didn't sound like celebration, but rather liberation. The auditorium turned into a war zone of cameras and voices. Police officers tried to restrain Marcello, who was screaming like a cornered animal. Beatrice, pale, tried to regain her composure, but her eyes betrayed her. Celio, standing with difficulty, handed each original document to the authorities. Helena watched, motionless, feeling the world rearrange itself before her. "You destroyed our family," Beatrice shouted, pointing her finger at her. "No, ma'am. Your greed did it all by itself," Helena replied calmly. The cameras captured the exact moment when the truth changed hands. Ricardo approached, microphone in hand, ready for the final question. "Why risk everything, Helena, when you could just disappear?" She took a deep breath, her eyes watery but steady. "Because silence is also a lie, and I've lied to myself too much." The words echoed in the room, shattering the air like glass. Celio lowered his head, moved as the flashes captured every expression. It was the moment when the nurse became a symbol, and fear became courage. The police led Beatrice and Marcello out, amid flashes of light and booms. Outside, the crowd screamed, not out of hatred, but out of catharsis. The Ferraz empire was crumbling under the weight of its own lies. Helena, exhausted, sat down and let her body relax for the first time in days. Ricardo turned off the cameras and placed his hand on her shoulder. "It's over, Helena." "No, Ricardo," she replied, looking at the envelope still in her bag. "There is something that is not over yet." Inside the envelope was the second letter, the one that mentioned the forgotten heiress. Later, at the police station, Celio gave his statement in a low voice. Augusto had another daughter, but he never officially acknowledged her. The police chief interrupted him. "Do you have proof of this?" "No, just this letter and the photo Helena found." Everyone looked at her as she carefully removed the image from the folder. "This woman looks exactly like Beatriz," the police officer commented. "Maybe sister, or maybe mother." The silence that followed was almost sacred. Helena understood at that moment that Augusto's story was much deeper than any will. Hours later, now free, she walked through the streets with slow steps. The city lights flickered, indifferent to the silent revolution she had caused. He looked up at the sky, dirty with smoke and hope. "You can rest now, Augusto," he murmured. But he knew that complete rest still required one more truth. The next day's newspapers carried headlines in large letters. "False will. Ferraz family investigated for fraud and corruption." Helena Duarte's name appeared on all channels, but without distortion. This time, she was portrayed as a heroine, not a villain. Even so, the relief brought the bitter taste of fatigue. She lost her job, her privacy and her peace. People recognized her on the streets. Some applauded, others looked away. The house where he lived was invaded by curious people looking for photos and souvenirs, and on sleepless nights, she wondered if it had all been worth it. But deep down, I knew that justice isn't sweet. It's just necessary. Celio looked for her weeks later, his face more serene, without crutches. I had a meeting with the judge in charge of the estate. He validated the true will. Helena took a deep breath, her eyes welling with relief and sadness. What about donations? He asked. They are already being transferred. Half of the fortune will go to social institutions. She smiled, but the gesture was filled with longing. He always wanted to help those who no one could see. Now he has. Celio nodded. And the name of the foundation? He left it up to you to choose. Helena took a while to respond, looking at the distant horizon. It will be called Caring Hands. That's what I did until the end. Ricardo appeared soon after with an expression of gratitude and pride. Your face is all over the country, you know. People call you the truth nurse. I didn't want to be remembered like that, she replied, smiling slightly. I just wanted them to remember him and what he tried to fix. Ricardo laughed, adjusting the camera. Sometimes the truth needs a face. At night, Helena walked to the old Faraz mansion, now empty. The windows were broken, the garden was neglected. The gate was rusty. She entered alone in silence and went up to the room where it all began. The safe was still there, empty, but full of memories. She touched the cold metal and whispered, I kept my promise. As I walked down the stairs, the wind opened an old drawer. Inside, a forgotten envelope, Augustus's seal intact. She opened it with trembling hands and read in a low voice, If you're reading this, it's because you did what I didn't have the courage to do. Thank you. Helena cried for the first time without guilt. Outside, dawn colored the sky in shades of new beginnings. She walked towards the gate and before leaving, she looked back. The mansion seemed smaller, as if the truth had lifted its weight. Helena smiled, closed the gate, and walked down the wet stone street. Justice had been served, and the silence was finally at peace. A month has passed since the day the name Helena Duarte graced the country. The dust of the news had dissipated, but the echo of the truth still vibrated in the streets. Helena now lived in a small country town, surrounded by trees and silence. There, time moved at a different pace, the pace of healing. She worked in a simple nursing home where gratitude came in smiles. The elderly ladies loved her stories. The old men called her Doctor of the Soul. Sometimes at night she still dreamed of the safe, of the metallic sound of the secret opening. But now the sound no longer brought fear, but a strange kind of peace. One of her patients had once told her, "The truth, my daughter, is the best medicine for the soul." Helena smiled, because deep down she knew it was. One Sunday afternoon, the postman arrived at the gate with a yellowed envelope. To Mrs. Helena Duarte, delivered in person, without delay. She found it strange. She hadn't expected any correspondence, and the sender was familiar. In the corner, the seal of Celio Andrade's former office. His hands were shaking even before he broke the seal. Inside, a letter written in the same handwriting as Augusto. Her heart stopped for a second, as if time had gone back. "Helena," the text began, "if this letter reached you, it is because you kept your promise." The following lines were confessions of a man seeking forgiveness. "I left the world believing my inheritance was money. Now I know it was you." She put her hand to her mouth, holding back the tears that came like a tide. Augusto said he had left instructions to create a foundation in her name. An entity that would care for elderly people without families, sick people without a voice. "You are the only good thing left in me," the letter read. "Justice was your gift to me." Helena read each word with the serenity of someone closing a cycle. At the end, there was one last line written in a firm, simple stroke. "Truth is the only legacy that does not corrupt." She folded the letter and put it in her apron pocket next to her stethoscope. The tears came softly without pain, like a silent reunion. Outside, The sun streamed through the trees like a quiet blessing. Days later, Celio appeared at the nursing home, thinner but smiling. "I came to bring you news," he said. "The Caring Hands Foundation was inaugurated today." Helena hugged him gratefully, her heart light and firm. "He lives through this, Doctor, and through us." Celio nodded, his eyes welling up. "Yes, and the world is already a better place because of it." When he was gone, Helena walked to the asylum garden. The wind played with the leaves, and a group of elderly people laughed in the distance. She sat down on a bench, took the letter out of her pocket and read it again. Then he closed his eyes and let the wind carry away his last tears. Life went on, simple, fair, and finally, at peace. The imaginary camera pulled back, showing the garden in the golden sunset. On the screen, the sentence that concluded it all appeared. Some secrets were not meant to hide evil, but to reveal good. Sometimes the truth comes quietly, just with the weight of what is right. And if this story made you think about the value of those who remain, then this channel has already fulfilled its role, telling stories that touch what is human in us. Here, each story holds a piece of life, a reflection of what we could be. If you want to continue experiencing these emotions with me, subscribe. It's just a click, but it helps keep this way of telling the world with feeling alive. Oh, and if Helena's journey touched you, leave a like. Not out of habit, but so I know these stories have also found your heart. In the next video, we continue exploring what money can buy and what it can never buy. I'll see you there.